What would you do if you had to choose between your future and helping a stranger in need? Carrie, a struggling college student, donated her last savings to a homeless family, but she didn't expect that this action would bring unprecedented returns. The wind howled through the streets, carrying with it the faint scent of salt water and decay. Carrie zipped up her blouse, feeling the autumn chill stronger than usual. She clutched the envelope in her hand. $900 in cash, her entire savings from months of waitressing double shifts and skipping meals to make ends meet. It was meant for her tuition and textbooks, a lifeline to keep her dreams of graduating alive. But as she approached the university gates, something made her pause. A faint cough echoed from a nearby alley, followed by the sound of a child's whimper. Carrie hesitated, her steps slowing. She knew this part of town well, the side streets where the city's forgotten souls gathered. This neighborhood had once been vibrant, a tight-knit community of working-class families. But that was before Hurricane Lydia had torn through the coast 2 years ago, leaving devastation in its wake. The storm had flooded entire blocks, destroyed homes, and shattered lives. Many were rebuilt, but others were still struggling and never recovered. Carrie had grown up just a few blocks away. She remembered the night of the storm vividly. The howling wind, the crashing waves, the frantic rush to evacuate. Her family had been lucky. Their home had survived, barely. But so many others hadn't been as fortunate. She had watched neighbors lose everything. Their homes, their jobs, their sense of security. Some had left the city, while others, like the family in the alley, had been left to pick up the pieces in a system that had long since forgotten them. Curiosity tugged at her, and she turned into the alley. The sight that greeted her was both familiar and heartbreaking. A family of 4 huddled under a tarp that barely shielded them from the elements. Their belongings were scattered around them in plastic bags, the remnants of a life washed away by the storm. A man with hollow cheeks and tired eyes sat slumped against the wall, while a woman cradled a small child in her arms. The child, no older than 5, coughed weakly, their face flushed with fever. A younger sibling, barely a toddler, clung to the woman's leg, their wide eyes filled with a mix of fear and innocence. Carrie's chest tightened. She had seen this before, too many times. After the hurricane, the streets had been filled with families just like this one, their lives upended in an instant. She had volunteered at shelters, handed out supplies, and listened to stories of loss and resilience. But as time passed, the world had moved on, leaving behind those who couldn't rebuild. The woman looked up, her eyes meeting Carrie's. There was no pleading, no desperation in her gaze, just a quiet resignation that made Carrie's heart ache. "Please," the woman said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My baby's sick. We just need something for medicine." Carrie's grip tightened on the envelope. She thought of her parents, of the sacrifices they had made to get her here. She thought of the tuition deadline looming over her, the textbooks she still needed to buy, the fear of losing everything she had worked for. But then she looked at the child, their small body shivering under the thin tarp, and something inside her shifted. Memories flooded her mind. The night of the hurricane, huddled in a shelter with her family, listening to the cries of those who had lost everything. The months that followed, watching her neighbors struggle to rebuild their lives. The guilt she had felt when her family had managed to recover, while others were left behind. Before she could second-guess herself, Carrie stepped forward and handed the envelope to the woman. "Take it," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "It's not much, but it's all I have." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "I can't," she stammered, shaking her head. "This is too much." "It's for your child," Carrie insisted, pressing the envelope into her hands. "Please, just get them the help they need." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The woman's eyes filled with tears, and she clutched the envelope to her chest like a lifeline. The man beside her looked up, his expression a mix of gratitude and guilt. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You don't know what this means to us." Carrie nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of what she had just done settled over her like a heavy blanket, both terrifying and freeing. She had no idea how she would pay her tuition now, no idea what the consequences would be. But as she stepped out of the alley and back into the bustling streets, she felt a strange sense of peace. The walk home felt longer than usual. Carrie's footsteps echoed against the cracked pavement, each one a reminder of the weight pressing down on her chest. The envelope was gone, and with it, her safety net. She replayed the moment in her mind, the expression of gratitude in each one in that family, how this gesture may have changed their future. She had done the right thing. She had to believe that. But as she turned the corner onto her street, doubt crept in. Her parents' small house came into view, its faded paint and sagging porch a testament to years of hard work and sacrifice. Her father's old pickup truck sat in the driveway, its engine still warm from his late shift at the factory. Carrie paused at the front steps, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The moment she stepped inside, the tension hit her like a wall. Her mother was in the kitchen, her back turned as she scrubbed a pot with more force than necessary. Her father sat at the table, his calloused hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, his face etched with exhaustion. The air was thick with unspoken words, the kind that hung heavy in the silence. "Where have you been?" her mother asked, her voice sharp but not unkind. "You were supposed to be home an hour ago." Carrie hesitated, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. "I had something to take care of." Her father looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Something to take care of? Carrie, we've been waiting. Your tuition's due tomorrow, and we need to make sure everything's in order." Her stomach churned. She had hoped to ease into the conversation, to find the right words to explain what she had done. But there was no easing into this. She set her backpack down and reached into her pocket, pulling out the receipt from the pharmacy where she had exchanged the cash for a money order. "I gave the money away," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Her mother turned around, her hands still dripping with soapy water. "What do you mean you gave it away?" Carrie swallowed hard, her throat dry. "There was a family in the alley near campus. They lost everything in the hurricane, and their child was sick. They needed help, and I couldn't just walk away." Her father slammed his mug down on the table, the sound echoing through the small kitchen. "You gave away $900? Are you out of your mind?" "It was the right thing to do," Carrie shot back, her voice trembling. "They had nothing, Dad. Nothing. And we have each other. We have a roof over our heads. How could I just ignore that?" "Because that money wasn't just yours," her father roared, his face red with anger. "Your mother and I worked our asses off to help you save that. Do you have any idea what we've sacrificed to get you into that school?" "I know," Carrie shouted, tears welling in her eyes. "I know what you've sacrificed, and I'm grateful. But what was I supposed to do? Let that child suffer because I was too scared to take a risk?" Her mother stepped forward, her hands raised in a plea for calm. "Carrie, we're not saying you shouldn't care, but you can't just throw away your future like that. You have to think about yourself too." "I was thinking about myself," Carrie said, her voice breaking. "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't help them. I couldn't." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them like a storm cloud. Her father leaned back in his chair, his anger giving way to a deep, weary sadness. "You think you're the only one who wants to help? You think we don't see people struggling every day? But you can't save everyone, Carrie. Sometimes you have to put yourself first." Carrie wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her chest aching with a mix of guilt and defiance. "Maybe I can't save everyone, but I could save them, and I did. I'm not sorry for that." Her mother sighed, her shoulders slumping. "What's done is done. But now what? How are you going to pay your tuition? How are you going to buy your books?" Carrie didn't have an answer. She had acted on impulse, driven by a sense of duty she couldn't ignore. But now, faced with the consequences, she felt the full weight of her decision. She sank into a chair, her hands trembling as she buried her face in them. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible. I don't know what I'm going to do. Her father stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked to the window, his back to her as he stared out at the darkening sky. You've always had a big heart, Carrie, but the world doesn't reward kindness. Takes. And if you're not careful, it'll take everything from you. The words stung, but Carrie couldn't bring herself to argue. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. But as she sat there, surrounded by the people who had given her everything, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had let them down. The silence stretched on, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and the sound of a car engine faded into the night. Carrie closed her eyes, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. What had she done? And what was she going to do now? The tension in the house was palpable, a heavy silence that seemed to press against the walls. Carrie sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. Her parents had retreated to the living room, their low murmurs just audible through the thin walls. She could feel their disappointment like a physical weight, and it made her chest ache. She stared at the receipt in her hand, the one from the pharmacy where she had exchanged the cash for a money order. It felt like a lifeline and a death sentence all at once. She had done the right thing, she had to believe that. But the reality of her situation was impossible to ignore. Her tuition was due tomorrow, and she had no way to pay it. The sound of a car engine outside broke the silence. Carrie glanced out the window, her brow furrowing as a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. It was out of place in their modest neighborhood, its polished exterior gleaming under the streetlights. The driver's door opened, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out, his presence commanding attention even from a distance. Carrie's heart skipped a beat. She didn't recognize him, but there was something about the way he carried himself, confident, purposeful, that made her uneasy. He adjusted his tie and walked up the path to their front door, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. Her father appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression wary. "Who's that?" "I don't know," Carrie said, her voice barely above a whisper. The knock on the door was firm but not aggressive, a sound that demanded attention without being rude. Her father exchanged a glance with her mother before walking to the door and opening it. The man on the doorstep was in his late 40s, with sharp features and graying hair that gave him an air of authority. He smiled politely, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good evening. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm looking for Carrie Bennett." Carrie's breath caught in her throat. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked to the door. "I'm Carrie," she said, her voice trembling. Hayes' gaze shifted to her, and his smile softened. "Ah, Carrie, it's a pleasure to meet you. May I come in?" Her father stepped aside, his expression a mix of confusion and suspicion. Hayes entered the house, his presence filling the small space. He glanced around, taking in the modest surroundings with a polite detachment, before turning his attention back to Carrie. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, his tone businesslike but not unkind. "I understand you helped a family earlier today, a mother, father, and 2 children. Is that correct?" Carrie nodded, her heart pounding. "Yes, they needed help." Hayes' expression softened further, and something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "You gave them $900, didn't you?" Her parents' eyes widened, and her mother let out a small gasp. Carrie felt her face flush, but she held Hayes' gaze. "Yes, I did." Hayes nodded, as if her confirmation was exactly what he had expected. "That family, their names are Juliet and Rick Morant. They've been on my radar for some time. I run a nonprofit organization that helps families displaced by natural disasters, and I've been trying to locate them to offer assistance. Unfortunately, they've been difficult to track down. Until today." Carrie's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. "You know them?" "Not personally," Hayes admitted, "but I've been following their story. When I heard what you did for them, I knew I had to meet you. My assistant asked around the neighborhood and we were able to reach you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. "Carrie, what you did today was extraordinary. In a world where most people turn a blind eye to suffering, you stepped up. That kind of compassion is rare, and it's something I deeply respect. Carrie stared at the card, her hands trembling. I just did what I thought was right. And that's exactly why I'm here, Hayes said. I want to make sure your act of kindness doesn't go unrewarded. I'd like to cover your tuition and expenses for the remainder of your education. And, if you're interested, I'd like to offer you an internship at my organization. We could use someone with your heart and determination. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Carrie's parents exchanged stunned glances, their earlier anger replaced by disbelief. Carrie felt her knees go weak, and she reached out to steady herself against the wall. I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice barely audible. Hayes smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes this time. You don't have to say anything right now. Take some time to think about it. But know this, what you did today mattered. Not just to the Morants, but to me. And I have a feeling it's going to matter to a lot of other people too. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a check, handing it to her. This should cover your immediate expenses. Consider it a down payment on your future. Carrie took the check, her hands shaking so badly she could barely read the amount. It was more than enough to cover her tuition and then some. She looked up at Hayes, tears welling in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Hayes nodded, his expression kind but firm. Thank you, Carrie. You've reminded me why I do what I do. I'll be in touch. With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving the family in stunned silence. The sound of his car engine faded into the night, and Carrie sank into a chair, the check clutched tightly in her hand. Her parents stared at her, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. Carrie, her mother said softly. What just happened? Carrie looked up, tears streaming down her face. I think everything just changed. The days that followed Robert Hayes' visit were a whirlwind. Carrie's life, once defined by the quiet struggle of balancing work, school, and family, had suddenly been thrust into the spotlight. The check Hayes had given her covered her tuition and more, lifting a weight off her shoulders that she hadn't realized was crushing her. But with that relief came a new kind of pressure, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. The story of her selfless act had spread like wildfire. It started with a local news outlet picking up the story, and within days it had gone viral. Social media was flooded with posts about the college student who gave her last savings to a homeless family, and Carrie found herself inundated with messages of praise, requests for interviews, and even offers of donations from strangers who had been moved by her story. At first, it was overwhelming. Carrie had never sought attention, and the sudden influx of it left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. But as the days passed, she began to see the impact her actions had on others. People reached out to share their own stories of kindness and struggle, and Carrie realized that her act had sparked something bigger than herself, a reminder that even small gestures could make a difference. One afternoon, as she sat in the campus library trying to focus on her studies, her phone buzzed with a text from Hayes. Carrie, the Morants are doing well. We've secured them temporary housing and medical care for their child. They asked me to thank you again. Also, we're planning a small event to honor your actions. Let me know if you're available next week. Carrie stared at the message, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She had been so caught up in the chaos of her own life that she hadn't stopped to think about the family she had helped. Knowing they were safe and receiving the support they needed filled her with a sense of relief she hadn't realized she needed. The event Hayes mentioned turned out to be anything but small. It was held at a downtown hotel, its grand ballroom filled with influential people from the city's business and philanthropic communities. Carrie had never been in a room like this before. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the hum of conversation among people who seemed to radiate success. She felt out of place in her simple dress, but Hayes greeted her with a warm smile and a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You belong here, he said, as if reading her thoughts. What you did deserves to be celebrated. The ceremony was brief but impactful. Hayes took the stage and recounted the story of Carrie's act of kindness, his voice filled with genuine admiration. He spoke about the importance of compassion in a world that often felt cold and indifferent, and he praised Carrie for embodying the values his organization stood for. When it was her turn to speak, Carrie's hands trembled as she approached the microphone. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she began, her voice shaky but sincere. "I just saw someone in need and did what I thought was right. But what I've learned over the past few weeks is that kindness isn't just about helping one person. It's about creating a ripple effect. It's about reminding each other that we're not alone, that we're all connected." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "I'm grateful for the recognition, but this isn't just about me. It's about choosing to care, even when it's hard, even when it costs us something, because that's how we change the world, one small act at a time." The room erupted in applause, and Carrie felt a lump rise in her throat. She stepped away from the microphone, her legs unsteady, and Hayes handed her a plaque commemorating her extraordinary compassion and courage. As the event wound down, people approached her to shake her hand and offer their congratulations. Some shared their own stories of kindness, while others simply thanked her for inspiring them. Carrie smiled and nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone, scrolling through the messages she had received over the past few days. Among the countless notifications was one from an unknown number. "Hi Carrie, this is Juliette Morant. I just wanted to thank you again for what you did for my family. Because of you, my son is getting the care he needs, and we have a safe place to stay. You've given us hope, and I'll never forget that." Carrie's eyes filled with tears as she read the message. This was why she had done it. Not for the recognition, not for the applause, but for moments like this, moments that reminded her of the power of human connection. As she left the event that night, the plaque in her hand and Juliet's words in her heart, Carrie felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She had started something, and she was determined to see it through. The weeks that followed the ceremony were a blur of activity. Carrie's life had shifted in ways she could never have imagined. The internship at Hayes' organization, which she had accepted with equal parts excitement and trepidation, turned out to be more rewarding than she had anticipated. She found herself working on projects that directly impacted families like the Morants, using her voice and her story to advocate for those who had been overlooked by society. Her days were a balancing act, juggling her classes, her internship, and the newfound demands of her public role. But for the first time in her life, Carrie felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weight of her financial struggles had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose that fueled her every step. One afternoon, as she sat in the organization's office reviewing a grant proposal, Hayes walked in with a smile. "Got a minute?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Carrie looked up, nodding. "Of course. What's up?" Hayes stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've been thinking about your story, how it's resonated with so many people, and I think there's an opportunity here to do something even bigger." Carrie tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "I want to launch a campaign," Hayes explained, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "A movement, really. One that encourages people to perform small acts of kindness and share their stories. We'll call it the Ripple Effect, inspired by what you said at the ceremony. What do you think?" Carrie's heart skipped a beat. The idea was overwhelming, but it also felt right. "I love it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But are you sure I'm the right person to lead something like that?" Hayes smiled, his expression warm but firm. "Carrie, you've already led it. This is just the next step. You've inspired thousands of people. Imagine what we can do if we channel that energy into something tangible." The campaign launched a month later with Carrie at its center. It started small, a website, a social media presence, and a series of events where people could share their stories of kindness. But it quickly gained momentum, spreading far beyond what anyone had anticipated. People from all walks of life began posting their own acts of kindness, using the hashtag the Ripple Effect. Stories poured in from around the world, each one a testament to the power of compassion. Carrie found herself traveling to schools, community centers, and even corporate events, sharing her story and encouraging others to do the same. It was exhausting at times, but it was also exhilarating. She had never felt so alive, so connected to something greater than herself. Amid the chaos, she made sure to stay grounded. She visited the Morants regularly, watching as their lives slowly stabilized. Juliet had found a part-time job, and Rick was taking classes to learn a new trade. Their children were thriving, their laughter a constant reminder of why Carrie had made that fateful decision in the alley. As the months passed, Carrie's life continued to evolve. She graduated from college with honors, her family beaming with pride as she walked across the stage. Hayes offered her a full-time position at the organization, and she accepted without hesitation. But amidst all the success, Carrie never lost sight of what mattered most. She continued to advocate for those in need, using her platform to shine a light on issues that often went unnoticed. And she never stopped performing small acts of kindness, whether it was buying a meal for a stranger or simply lending an ear to someone who needed to be heard. One day, as she stood on the stage at another event, looking out at a sea of faces, she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had started with a single act of kindness, and it had grown into something far beyond herself. The ripple effect was real, and it was just beginning. When she least expected it, an act of kindness changed Carrie's life forever. We never know what the future holds. If this story inspired you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more heartwarming tales of courage and compassion. See you in the next video.